Okay, for my project, we're going to be talking about Jeffrey Dahmer. So Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Monster and the Milwaukee Cannibal, was born on May 21st, 1960. He was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and he's the first of two sons. Their parents were Joyce and Lionel Dahmer. When Dahmer was younger, he had an odd thrill, is what he called it, to dead animals after he saw his dad removing animal bones from under the house. After that, he kind of started getting more interested in it, and he would look for dead animals, he would look for bones under the house, and that just became his interest. At one point, Dahmer even asked his father what were to happen if he put chicken bones in bleach, and then his father began to explain how to dismember bones, basically. He ended up pulling a very violent prank and nailed an animal to a tree and decapitated it. Dahmer attended Revere High School, I think it is, and by age 14, he started being known as an outcast and started getting a really bad drinking problem. He would explain to people that alcohol was his medicine. So Dahmer's first victim was Stephen Hicks, and he was murdered 3 weeks after Dahmer's graduation. He was a hitchhiker, and Dahmer picked him up on the side of the road and offered to go to his house and go drink or whatever. After Stephen Hicks and Jeffrey were hanging out for a little bit, Stephen wanted to go. As he was attempting to leave, Jeffrey hit him in the back of the head with a dumbbell. He stared at the body for hours, and then he dragged the body into the basement. He dissected his body the next day in his garage and put the bones in the backyard. So Dahmer had applied to Ohio State University, but he was then kicked out for not doing his work, skipping class, and his GPA being a 0.45. His parents then came home to him living in a complete mess. There was alcohol everywhere, nothing had been cleaned, there was moldy food in the fridge, nothing. Jeffrey's dad then seen what Jeffrey was living in and how he was treating his school, so he enlisted him into the Army. Jeffrey was in the Army from 1979 to 1981. In September of 1981 is when he moved back to Ohio with his father. After he returned home, he was shortly arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct, so his parents, aka his stepmom and his dad, made him go live with his grandmother. When Dahmer had moved in with his grandmother, his parents were actually starting to see some sort of change. He was cleaning up after himself, he was getting a job, he was doing good. On November 20th, 1987, Dahmer met a 25-year-old. His name was Stephen Tuomi, and he was from Michigan. So according to Dahmer, with this victim, he had no intention on killing him, but to just drug him and take pictures of him. So Dahmer had woken up in the hotel room the next morning with him dead. It says he was lying beneath the bed and his stomach was crushed in and he was black and blue. In order to dispose of the body, he had to go get a very large suitcase to then get him out of the hotel. A week later, he completely dismembered the body and was able to get rid of it and throw it in the trash. Except for his head, that he severed off. For 2 weeks after he killed him, he kept his head wrapped in a blanket. On March 24th, 1988, he met a bisexual man. His name was Richard Guerrero, and he was 22 years old. Dahmer then led him back to his apartment, drugged him, raped him, and then dismembered his body. So then April 24th, a month and 1 day after the second killing, he then tried to lure another man into his house. Mind you, he's still living with his grandma at the time. And all these bodies and everything he's dissecting is in his grandma's basement. He attempted to lure Ronald Flowers Jr. Now before Jeffrey could kill him, his grandma was calling for him. He then realized that he wasn't able to kill him that night, and he took him to the hospital. In September of 1988, Dahmer's grandmother then asked him to move out because his drinking was getting bad again, and she was getting these awful, awful smells from the basement, and she just wanted it to stop. He moved into a new place on September 25th. 2 days after, he raped and drugged a 13-year-old boy. Within 1 week of Dahmer living in his new apartment, he killed his sixth victim. He was able to lure Raymond Smith into his house. Smith was a 22-year-old prostitute, and all Jeffrey said was that he wanted pictures. The day after he killed him, he went and he purchased a Polaroid camera. He took several pictures of Smith's body and then began to dismember him. On May 27th, Dahmer had lured another man into his apartment, but he had mixed up the drinks and he had drank the one that had the drugs in it. So when he woke up, he had realized he had been robbed, but he obviously is not going to go to the police with everything he has in his apartment. In June 1990, Dahmer killed 27-year-old Edward Smith. He was drugged and strangled. Less than 3 months later, he killed 22-year-old Ernest Miller. He drugged him and slashed his artery. Carotid artery, I think it is. He wrapped multiple parts of Miller's body up and dismembered them. 3 weeks after he killed him, he killed a 22-year-old father named David Thomas, and he had 2 kids. In total, Jeffrey Dahmer had 17 victims between 1978 and 1991. So on July 22nd, 1991, Jeffrey attempted to lead these 3 men back to his apartment. By 11:30 that night, one of the men had escaped and was able to flag down 2 police officers. When the cops had entered the home, Jeffrey was trying to play it off and make it seem like it wasn't whatever he was trying to do. As both of the police officers started to look around, they started noticing weird things in the apartment, like a huge knife under the bed. Once the cops found the Polaroids that he had taken of the dead bodies, it was over for him. I'm gonna have to look down and read this information because this is insane. A total of 7 skulls were found, some painted and some bleached. They discovered blood, 2 human hearts, a portion of an arm muscle, an entire torso, a bag of human organs and flesh, 2 entire skeletons, a pair of severed hands, 2 severed and preserved, a mummified scalp, then 3 more dismembered torsos that were dissolving in acid. And a total of 74 Polaroid pictures were found. After Dahmer was arrested on July 23rd, 1991, he was questioned by investigators. He ended up admitting to dismembering the bodies, killing them, taking pictures of them, and basically just admitting everything. Sadly, he was not charged with 2 of the murders. On January 13th, 1992, he had pled guilty to 15 counts of murder. His trial began January 30th, 1992. So Jeffrey's dad really blamed himself for showing him the dead animals and stuff when he was younger because he felt like that played a huge part in it. He basically just ended up really regretting, like, everything. Okay, that was my project, and my mom also just got me a new cup. Okay, thank you.